Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm Mike Evans as we come to you during dark times for the Avalanche. Certainly something that we haven't seen from this team all season long. They're in the midst of a 4-game losing streak, 3 losses in a row in regulation, bottoming out with the 4-0 loss to Florida, in which after the game, Cale Makar was at a loss for words saying, hey, we're doing things I just haven't seen during the time I've been here with the Avs. So the question that I think we all have is, what are we watching right now? Are we watching just a slump? Are we watching a team that's in the midst of a long road trip during the dog days of the NHL? And don't worry, they'll be okay, and they'll get it back, and this will end up being a good thing, and they'll be fine come playoff time. And if anything, this will help steel them for the playoffs, right? There's that. Or there's the idea that, hey, there's something wrong here that needs to be fixed, that needs to be addressed before the trade deadline. And if you want to have any chance of being a team that's going to be able to go on another Stanley Cup run, things have got to change. What camp are you in? Are you in the camp that this is a slump? They'll be okay. They'll play themselves out of it. They'll be fine. Or are you in that camp where, hey, there's some things that are wrong here? Put me in the latter. There's some stuff going on here. You don't, as an Avalanche team, they have a standard that just this kind of hockey just is foreign to so many of us. Now, I know that they've had some losing streaks before. Heck, it was their cup winning year that right at the end of the season, they had a bit of a losing streak that had some people panicking. But that team at that point had already established itself as one that had passed the eye test. You knew they were ready to go, and you could blow off that end of the season little mini slump as just a team that was eager to get the season over with and wanted to get on to the playoffs. And they went out and proved that that was indeed the case. Right now, I think we're looking at something deeper. I think we're looking at a team that is flawed, a team that does have issues, and a team that needs to fix some things. So how do they go about in doing it? I go back to something I said on Friday, the last podcast I did. Boy, do they miss Val Nichushkin. He's a dynamic player. He brings so much to this lineup, so much pop that you have to account for, and to take that kind of production out of a lineup is a huge hole, a huge burden to this lineup. The second thing is, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's becoming painfully obvious, and I've been beating this drum now for a couple years. They have to do something about the second line center. Ryan Johansson just isn't it. It just is not it. It's not the answer. He's not the answer. They have to go out, and they got me burping here. I'm burping. It's like indigestion. It's like acid reflux from watching the Avalanche is causing me acid reflux. It's probably actually all the junk food I ate during my Super Bowl party. But anyway, sorry about that. But yeah, the Avs are making me burp. They have to do something at that second line center because I got mad out of the corner of my eye. I'm seeing he was all smiling. This is going to end up on a blooper reel, isn't it? I know this is going to go viral. This is going to show up. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. I could just see that devious, the wheels are turning. Hey, here's Mike Evans burping in the middle of his podcast. That's fine. I could take it. I've always wanted to be a meme or a GIF or whatever it would be. So there you go. But get back here on focus. Focus, everybody. Stop trying to get me off my game here. What to do now? Because they have to do something. And we've been talking about the names and the possibilities and the trade deadline. And, you know, we've talked about the Sean Monahans and the Adam Henriques of the world. Well, now there's a new one. And this one really intrigues me. Casey Middlestat of Buffalo. He's their leading scorer right now, coming off a career year last year, and putting together a decent year this year. But he's 25. He's going to be a restricted free agent, and the Sabres are, once again in that kind of cycle that they're in, where they thought that this was going to be the year that they started to turn things around. they haven't, and so they're kind of stuck in this, what are we? Is this a guy that we want to commit to? Do we want to pay big money to as a restricted free agent, or do we want to trade him and try to get something back in return? Do they feel like they have enough up front that they need to plug holes elsewhere in Middlestat, somebody that they can use? They're looking for a number one goalie, but they could also use a defenseman as well. This is where it gets interesting. So a guy like Casey Middlestat, 25 years old, productive player, best hockey ahead of him. The idea that you plug him into the Avalanche lineup with better personnel around him than he's had in Buffalo, this is somebody who might take off. And he's a restricted free agent, so he's not a rental. You're going to be able to control whether or not you bring him back or not. So it fits the profile of younger with a little bit more sense of being able to keep the player. So if you have to trade for him, you can feel like, hey, this guy could still be part of my long-term future. Problem with that is that you're going to have to give up more. And now we come back to the crux of the matter, is you're looking at probably having to give up a first-round pick this year in 2024, perhaps another good pick, third round, fourth round pick, maybe a prospect as well, or even the possibility of Byam. Now, at what point does going out and trying to get a bona fide second line center, at what point does it become too expensive for you, the Avalanche fan? It's something to consider, something to ask yourself. How much are you willing to give up to go get somebody that you, the organization, would be targeting as that second-line center? Do you believe the second-line center is what's going to keep this team from being able to win another Stanley Cup? Is the hole that big? Are there other holes that go beyond that, and that, yeah, maybe you can fill that second-line center, but at a cost, and you're still left with some other issues on this hockey team? Maybe not enough depth on defense, maybe goaltending. These are all questions that you got to ask yourself as a fan. For me, I believe with the Avalanche core, you've got the best core in hockey, assuming you get Val Nichushkin back. You get Val Nichushkin back, I think the Avalanche have the best core in hockey. Now it's what do you put around it? And more importantly, what kind of urgency do you have, do you feel, to maximize this core's championship window? Championship windows don't last forever. And I think it would be just an absolute hockey crime to not maximize the primes of Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, Val Nichushkin, Devon Toews. It'd be a crime not to maximize that window, which is why when it comes to what I'm willing to give up in a trade, I don't even hesitate to talk about the Avs 2024 first-round pick. Do not hesitate. Because, first of all, the percentage of draft picks that make it in the NHL is very long. You think the NFL draft is a crapshoot. You think the NBA draft, at least for teams not named the Denver Nuggets, is a crapshoot. Even more so in hockey. And you're talking about where the Avalanche would be picking later first round. Man, the likelihood of a hit rate on that player is pretty long. Plus, it's a player that you're going to be drafting who's 17, 18 years old. It's going to be a few years before that player even cracks your lineup. And at that point, where are you at with MacKinnon? Where are you at with this core? So I don't hesitate with the idea of giving up that first-round pick. I don't hesitate with the idea of giving up one of the top prospects that you have in your system. Again, there's nobody that's coming down the pike that you can look at and just say, man, that's a player that is untouchable. There just isn't. So for me, it's very simple. You're in a championship window. Championship windows don't last forever. If you get too caught up in the idea that you got to protect the future, you got to have the assets, you got to have the draft picks, you got to have the people in the pipeline. I think you do that for too long, then you run the risk of wasting what is a unique championship window. So whether it's first round picks, whether it's prospects, or whether it's Byam, I think Bo's been a little bit of a disappointment this year. I think most of you would agree with me. Now, I get it. He's young. He's talented. He's a player that has a bright upside, bright future, ton of potential. Okay, but you got to then still ask yourself, all right, Bo Byram, having a down year this year, but hey, you anticipate that he'll bounce back. Maybe, in year 2 or 3 from now, he'll be a dynamic player. Maybe. Or maybe he's somebody that's kind of maxed out. You also have the fact you get Sammy Girard's contract. It's a tough contract to move. And maybe you just can't afford to carry both a Bo Byram and a Samuel Girard. And because of Girard's contract, it makes him tougher to move because Byram is on a team-friendly deal, not making a whole lot of money, a little bit younger. He's got more value. So it really just kind of comes down to when you look at the possibility of making trades, how much you're willing to give up. And you got to ask yourself as an Avalanche fan, if the cost of a Casey Middlestat, for example, is a first-round pick and a prospect, one of your top prospects, or if it's Bo Byram, are you willing to do it? And you got to ask yourself. I personally, I'm willing to do it. If you think you're one piece away, and it could be a second-line center, who, by the way, you'll be in a position as a restricted free agent to be able to keep and make a long-term commitment to, that takes a lot of the sting out of whatever you may have to give up for that guy. So it's a deal I would make because I look at the Avalanche right now. Over the last couple of years since winning the Cup, the additions that they've made, the people that they've brought in, there's been too many Lars Ellers and Ryan Johanssons, even Zach Parise's. There's been too many of those type of guys. And for a team that's in a championship window, I think they have to be bolder. I think they have to be more dynamic. I think their moves have to carry more weight than what we've seen over the last couple of years. And so they're going to have to do something big. It's not because I'm putting so much into this losing streak that they're in. It was something that I was feeling even before this losing streak. Even with the losing streak, the Avs are still right there in the division. They're only 4th in the Western Conference. They're only a couple of points out of the top spot. So it's not like this losing streak has really sent them tumbling in the standings. Far from it. A couple more wins, bounce back, and they're right back on top of not only their division, but on top of the Western Conference. So this isn't the issue for me. The issue is not about points. It's not about standings. It's not about finish. It's not about seeds. It's about just what I know a Stanley Cup winning team looks like because we just saw it a couple years ago, and what we're watching right now, does that pass the smell test for you, the eye test for you, that we're looking at a team that's ready and equipped to go win a Stanley Cup? I don't. And I'm not even sure it's just filling out that hole at 2C either. I think it might even be a little bit deeper than that. But that's certainly, I think, the most pressing need they have is to go out and find that second-line center. And when you start hearing about, some of the names out there and what it might take to get that player, then I guess it circles right back to where we were at the start. How much are you, the Avalanche fan, prepared to give up for a guy that could fill that void? I'll leave that up to you as a fan. You heard my stance on it. I'd love to hear yours. Hit me up on Twitter, at Mike Evans 1043. Hit me up at any point on the text line during the Schlereth and Evans show, 303-713-1043. And we'll also see if me burping becomes a thing. Maybe it will. I don't know. Matt has the look over there of a guy who can't wait to do his magic and do his worst. So that's all right. I'm ready for it. Hey, that'll do it for today's edition of the Mile High Hockey Podcast. Next time we talk later in the week, the Avs will have finished this road trip with games at Washington and Tampa. Hopefully we'll have some better news to talk about. Maybe a little bit more clarity about what's going on with possible trade talks, as we're still about three weeks away from the trade deadline. But it's going to really start to pick up, and we'll see what kind of urgency the Avs feel to have them make a deal based on how they play over the remainder of this trip. All right, we'll see you again later in the week here on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.